DDA. I'll now turn it over to Maura Thompson to give a presentation on DDA activities.
Thank you, Jess. Welcome everybody to the June 2021 DDA informational meeting. As Jess mentioned, this is one of two informational meetings the DDA is required to have annually. We will cover DDA activities since the last informational meeting, which was in December of 2020. So this is basically a 6-month review. Sorry, I'm having an issue. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to break down the work of the DDA by revenue source. The DDA has two primary sources. We have parking fees, which support the operating and capital improvements activities in the parking system. And we have tax increment financing, better known as TIF, which supports the downtown development and affordable housing activities of the organization. Together, the activities of these two primary systems carry out the DDA's mission, which you can see in the orange oval, is to undertake public improvements that have the greatest impact on strengthening downtown and encouraging new private investment. So we're going to start with the parking system. The pandemic has certainly taken its toll on the parking system. We were very fortunate when we entered the pandemic in a strong position in terms of our fund balance and the condition of our facilities. Last March of 2020, we had a $13 million fund balance and facilities were in very good condition thanks to strict ongoing adherence to a 20-year maintenance plan. So this slide shows a snapshot of total parking fees as of the end of April. So this includes our on-street parking, hourly parking, and permits. And as a reminder, last March when the pandemic hit, the DDA was in the middle of our FY21 budget preparation. And in step with the city, we moved forward with pre-pandemic budget figures. So that yellow line you see on the graph, that shows our FY21 budget, again, pre-pandemic. The gray bars are our FY20 actuals. And I just want to note that the April through June fees that you see are made up almost entirely of permits. Remember we had raised the gates at all of our facilities and basically nobody was parking on street. The green bars show our FY21 actuals. We are currently at 48% of budget, and we had projected to come in at 47% of budget by the end of the year, which is, as you know, the end of this month. So we are on target to meet those projections. So clearly the parking system is suffering significant pandemic-related impacts, and the recovery is still very uncertain. However, the DDA's obligations are very straightforward, and we prioritize expenditures accordingly. So we know we have debt obligation. We will be paying that debt obligation. We also know that the city relies on 20% of parking revenue to support general fund activities, which in turn support our community. It's also essential that we keep our facilities safe for the public by doing ongoing critical repairs. And of course, we need to maintain these very important city assets. So this winter, we finished the replacement of the deteriorating stairwell at the 4th and Washington structure. You can see from the before and after that this was really necessary work. And if you look at the after, they did just a great job and it looks a whole lot cleaner and safer in that garage. We also completed a project that had begun pre-pandemic, replacing the ticket equipment throughout all facilities with new TIBA equipment. This project has just wrapped up, and we now have consistent ticketing equipment throughout all parking facilities, which improves our reporting, our customer service, and just overall system efficiency. In addition to the new stairwell and the TIBA equipment, there has also been annual restoration and maintenance work performed. Staff is working on issuing an RFP for a curbside management study. Staff has also been working with the Tree Line Group on a pilot project at 415 West Washington, and we've also installed additional deterrent fencing. The parking system also continues to support many of our COVID response efforts, including our curbside carryout program, our parking space repurposing program, weekend street closure program, meter bag fee waivers, and management. And I want to highlight the labor-intensive nature of the management of the meter bags. Republic Parking staff is incredibly responsive to the ongoing changes necessary to accommodate street closures, patios, pickup spots. They really go above and beyond in working with us to support the downtown business community. So now we will switch gears to TIF. Through TIF, the DDA takes on major infrastructure projects. And going back to our mission of taking on public improvements to strengthen downtown, at its core, the DDA is an infrastructure organization. Over the last several years, our projects have come under the DDA's People-Friendly Streets initiative. People-friendly streets projects are value-driven, and the discussion of resilience and our experience at the start of the pandemic helped to further shape these values. This past July, this board adopted the value set you see on this slide. And to name, I'm not going to read them all off, but to name just a few: safety, equitable access, affordability, resiliency. These values are the cornerstone for informing the goals of all DDA projects. Oops, sorry about that. These values also align with key city initiatives: building more affordable housing, carbon neutrality by 2030, and the city's 2025 Vision Zero goal. Again, the pandemic highlighted that we don't want to rebuild the status quo. We want to build better. By the end of next month, the First and Ashley Street project will be finished, completing our first round of people-friendly streets projects. Two-way traffic will be restored on both streets. A two-way protected bike lane has been installed on the east side of First Street. Stormwater improvements have been made, and streetscape improvements have been made along both corridors, with the majority of that work happening on First Street, including this beautiful plaza you see here in the picture at the corner of Liberty and First. We have also partnered with the city on this project, where they are undertaking water main work and street resurfacing. Division Street will be the first project in the next round of people-friendly streets projects. This month, the construction budget for the Division Street project will be brought to this board. Construction is anticipated to begin in August and includes a two-way protected bike lane on the east side of Division from Packard to Catherine. Division Street was the most heavily used pilot project and provides an important protected connection from Packard through downtown. And this happens to be my route into downtown. And I can tell you that the volume of traffic on Packard, volume of bike traffic just continues to grow. And this will be a great improvement to that connection through downtown. Next spring, the DDA, in partnership with the city, will be underway with the State Street Improvement Project. The city will be replacing water main and doing street resurfacing, and the DDA will be undertaking streetscape work from William to Washington. We have been, and we continue to engage with stakeholder groups in the community, and this input, along with analysis, is helping to shape the project based on the DDA's core values. Pedestrian volume in this neighborhood far exceeds vehicular volume, and the demand on curbside space is increasing and changing. So pedestrian safety and curbside flexibility are two key components that we are focusing on. Miller Catherine, this project is something we're particularly excited about because it's a collaboration with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. The DDA will support the Housing Commission's project on the 4th and Catherine parking lot by upsizing and extending the water main, making the project more competitive for funding, while also expanding the protected bikeway network and addressing a high crash corridor noted in the city's transportation master plan. This project will likely occur next year in 2022 ahead of the the Housing Commission's work at 4th and Catherine. The 4th Ave Street and Transit Improvement Project. This is another collaborative project. Not only are we working with the Housing Commission, but we're working with the AAATA. This project will support the Housing Commission's work at 350 South 5th, along with streetscape improvements to support transit operations at Blake and provide a safer and better experience for transit users on 4th Ave. And the timing of this project is yet to be determined. It's really going to be driven by the schedule of the Housing Commission. Once again, this year, TIF dollars have also funded many of our pandemic response efforts in support of the downtown business community. We provided $50,000 for barricades for the street closure program. The DDA funded this emergency effort last year, and thanks to this board's approval, we are funding it again this year. We're also funding all sidewalk occupancy permits for downtown businesses, and we provided signage for the merchant associations to display with public health messaging and wayfinding. The DDA also provides annual community support from both the parking system and TIF. Through the parking system, we provide funding for the Go Pass, the Get Downtown program. We manage all of the bike parking, and we, in a typical year, would waive over $300,000 in meter bag fees for nonprofits having events in our downtown. And with Art Fair back on, hopefully we're going to start to see some of those events coming back to our downtown. On the TIF side, the DDA provides the city with over $500,000 annually to support debt on the Justice Center. We do about $400,000 worth of sidewalk repair and maintenance. We have a vault grant program in place. We contribute $150,000 a year to the city's streetlight replacement program. And we provide over $300,000 a year into the DDA's Affordable Housing Fund. And I just had to highlight, this year, we also contributed to the closing costs for the purchase of Laurie Terrace, which kept that property as senior affordable housing. And just a shout out to Jennifer Hall and the staff at the Affordable Housing Commission. They closed on that project on March 12th. And the DDA is just really proud to have been a behind the scenes financial partner on that project. It's very important to our downtown. And finally, the DDA budgets about $100,000 annually to support holiday lights on our downtown trees. So that wraps up our June 2021 informational meeting. I encourage anyone who's interested in following all of the activities that the DDA undertakes to sign up for our newsletter at a2dda.org. And I would like to thank the board for its continued support, the DDA staff for all of its hard work, and our taxing authority partners. I know I saw Josie in the audience for always working with us. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maura. This concludes the informational meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority. This meeting is adjourned. DDA board members, don't go anywhere. Okay, that meeting closed. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Ann Arbor DDA June 2021 board meeting. My name is Jessica Letaw, and I'm the current DDA board chair. I'll go over details for today's meeting. DDA board members will participate by video and audio. Staff members and other attendees will participate by audio only. Other participants may include DDA staff, such as Maura Thompson, Sarah McCallum, Jada Hallbrook, Amber Miller, Kelly Graves, and Liz Rollo. Thank you to members of the public who are joining us today. Your microphone will be muted during the meeting. There are 4 4-minute speaking slots at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, and time has also been set aside at the end of the meeting for public comment. The chat function is enabled for use by DDA board members during the meeting to indicate you wish to speak. We ask that DDA members and staff members please identify yourself before speaking, and when not speaking, please mute your microphone. When it appears there's no disagreement, voting will be conducted by voice consensus. If it appears there's board member disagreement, a roll call vote will be taken. A reminder that during roll call, each member of the board must state that they are attending the meeting remotely, and their physical location, including county, city, township, or village and state where they are located. Maura, if you'll please open the meeting with a roll call of the DDA board.
Certainly. Micah Bartelme. Tom Crawford.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Alexandra Deek.
Here, City of Ann Arbor, County of Washtenaw, State of Michigan.
Bob Gunzel.
Present and participating in the City of Ann Arbor.
Jihei Kim. Tyler Kinley.
Present, City of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Marie Clough.
Present, City of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Jessica Lita.
Yes, City of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Jonathan Massey.
Present. I'm in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Molly McFarland. Darren McKinnon.
Present, City of Ann Arbor.
And Rishi Narayan.
Present, City of Ann Arbor.
We have a quorum.
Thanks, Maura. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the board meeting agenda?
Move. This is Tom Crawford.
Support.
Micah.
Kelly, did you get the support?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great. Before we vote on the board agenda, I'd like to request a motion and a second to amend the agenda to move the executive committee report to the beginning of the meeting. We have GovHR joining us this afternoon and would like them to speak now rather than wait until the meeting, as well as bylaw and procedure change that will be relevant to this meeting. So can I get a motion and a second?
Move
So
it,
moved.
Darren.
Bob.
Move, Darren. Bob, support. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve the board meeting agenda as amended?
This is Marie, so moved.
Thank you, Marie.
Micah, second.
Thank you, Micah. Any changes or discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Right.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the amended agenda for today's DDA board meeting is approved. At this point, I'll invite James Petrino and Cheryl Orr of GovHR and I4 to provide us with an update on the executive director search.
Thank you very much. We appreciate having the opportunity to address the full board. As the board is aware, we've been working closely with the executive committee for several months now on your executive director search. We appreciate the work that all 4 of those members have done. It's been a lot of information, a lot of conversation, and we think it's been a very deliberate and transparent process during their meetings. So I appreciate them and the staff for their assistance throughout. We're kind of in the home stretch now, which is exciting. My plan is, and I hope everyone, well, I'm not sure if I can share my screen, but that's okay. I'm going to walk through a memorandum that was provided to the executive committee. I'm not sure if it was provided to the board or not, but I'll basically walk through that memorandum and get you to where we need to be at the end. So the goal is to, during this meeting, make one significant decision with regard to timing of interviews with the full board, as well as I think the executive committee will have some discussion around other parts of the process. But in short, we are happy with the pool of candidates we currently have. And with our recommendation, we are continuing our search for approximately 2 more weeks. Our goal to deepen our pool. We want to make sure that we bring a diverse group of candidates to your executive board first, and then through them to the full board. And we think these last 2 weeks of push will only serve to better our pool. Cheryl and I have had the opportunity to video chat with 14 of the candidates that we have received applications from. To date, we've got 56 applications. Those video chat conversations have us convinced that we will be able to work through with the executive committee a fair and pool for the full board to decide who your next executive director will be. During the earlier meeting today, the executive committee set as June 30th our date to deliver a recruitment report to that committee. This recruitment report will be delivered in closed session, which is consistent with Michigan Open Meetings Act, that body is allowed to review paper resumes and application content from for public entities, for public appointments, if it is only the paper application that is being reviewed. This allows us to review as many candidates as we want without exposing those candidates to public scrutiny. As you can imagine, in these public positions, you hope that your pool stays private for as long as possible in order to entice more candidates to make application. The goal out of that June 30th meeting will be to identify between 6 and 8 candidates that the executive committee believe could be best fit. At that point, all of the process will be entirely open to the public. So those 6 to 8 candidates will be interviewed via Zoom, but in a public meeting on July 12th and 13th, starting at 4 p.m. We anticipate those interviews will be about 40 to 45 minutes each, but will allow for approximately 1 hour, which is why we're splitting it up over 2 days. The final schedule for that will be provided after June 30th, obviously, after we decide on the candidates and the number of candidates. Is there a question? Okay, just wait. After that meeting, those 2 meetings back to back, I anticipate that the executive committee will select a number between 3 and 5 candidates for the full board to interview, and setting of that date of interview will be a task we're requesting the full board consider and make a decision on today. Those full board interviews we anticipate to be approximately 50 to 60 minutes. So if we run with an assumption that the executive committee will identify 4 individuals for you to interview, we will need a time period of approximately 1 hour, which will include some discussion. As I shared with the executive committee, about 50% of the time when we're engaged with a city council or a board such as this, the board will decide to defer a decision and not make it the date of the interviews. As you can imagine, having 3 to 4 hours of interviews with individuals that you're asking very intense questions and listening very intently for answers, that can be wearing on a board. And sometimes folks want to sleep on it and then come back fresh to discuss the candidates. At GovHR and I4X, we're happy to facilitate that discussion to arrive at the candidate that you believe would be best fit. So I'm going to pause for the moment. I'll take any questions that you may have. I would like for the board to consider a date for full board interviews, and that would have to be at some time, I would say, after the week of July 26th, in order to provide notice to candidates after the July 12th and 13th interviews with the executive committee. The board, not at this moment, but as we approach that date, we can leave open the question if those will be in-person interviews or if we will continue with the Zoom format. So that's not a decision to be made today necessarily. I will return after your discussion to kind of go through the final steps of the process, but would like to pause for a discussion on a 4-hour window with the board for interviews, as well as a date if needed for very shortly after that first date, decision on a preferred candidate.
This is Jessica. So I'll kick off the board discussion by reminding us that we do not currently have an August board meeting scheduled. And so we could potentially schedule a special meeting for that week, possibly doing the interviews the day of the 3rd, which is a Tuesday, and then a discussion the following day, a typical board meeting the 4th. There has been discussion, or there was discussed in the executive committee meeting today, the possibility of doing the interviews during our normal board meeting on the 4th. I'll note, as James just said, that there's conventionally an hour per interview. So we'd go from, you know, our typical hour or hour and a half meeting to over 4 hours. And I'm not clear how convenient that is for people to be able to take that time out in the middle of the day. So again, my first draft suggestion is the week of August 2nd, possibly the 3rd and the 4th. Thoughts, questions, feelings?
This is Jonathan with a question. That's 2 months from now. Is there a high probability of losing some candidates by such an extended process?
Jonathan, that's a really astute question. And in this process, whether it's a DDA board or a city council appointment of a position like this, they tend to be extended processes, and you tend to lose 1 or 2 candidates. Knowing our pool, at least at the moment, what our pool is, I'm not overly concerned to that point. But yes, with public employment, I do think that's an accurate concern. But with require public meetings and process, it's a little bit par for the course.
Thank
And
you.
Jonathan, one more piece of information to your question. Our decision is not final. What we'll be deciding on after a discussion of the candidates is a recommended candidate, final candidate, to bring as a resolution to City Council. City Council has the final affirmation. So even after our process concludes, there's a little bit longer. Any other questions about the process? Thoughts about taking the 3rd and the 4th as our days for the interviews, or the interview and the discussion?
Jessica, this is Tom Crawford. I think that I can make that work. I'm excited to try to sit down and talk to those candidates.
Any other thoughts, questions, feelings on those dates? If we're talking about interviews for the 3rd, are we talking about them during the day or in the evening?
This is Jonathan. I would propose daytime from my point of view. That's a vacation week for me, just speaking personally. Easier to carve out time during the day.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
So it sounds like there's a few things going on. I would suggest maybe, I don't know if we have to lock it down right now, or if we could take it to a doodle poll or something like that, just because like the day could work, but there's a couple times, and the evening could work, but there's also a couple times sounds like we have some vacation things. I don't know. I just like if if we're actually going to try to like lock it down, we might want to do it that way. Just
There's a strong desire on Cheryl and James's behalf to lock it down right now, because as they go back to candidates and finalize the schedule with them, they're going to be committing to them on the interview schedule. It's one way to not lose people.
got it. Then I guess daytime is fine, other than jumping in and out, I guess, at that juncture.
This is Darren. We're talking about the final interview date right now, not the initial
Correct.
interviews, right?
Final interview.
Right. So we're not necessarily locking anybody down for a time slot because we don't know who those individuals are.
Not them, us.
Okay. I'm just going back to Rishi's comment about trying to find what times during the day or evening might work for everyone.
That's what this discussion is. Like I'm hoping to find a 4-hour stretch where we can have the interviews and then a time, perhaps an hour the following day. So my proposal right now is sometime during the 3rd, and what I'm hearing is daytime, so possibly 1 to 5 on the 3rd, and then our typical board meeting time on the 4th for discussion and decision. All of that is negotiable. It's just the first draft.
1 to 5. I don't know if this is the best way to do this. 1 to 5 on the 3rd would work for me. I just have to move something, but if that is what people are thinking, then that's fine with me.
Okay. Maybe I'll ask a smaller question. Is there anybody for whom those 2 dates and times do not work, with the hope that we're getting everybody at the table? This is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay. James and Cheryl, do you have what you need from us?
Yes, I do. So the 3rd from 1 to 5 is our hold position. If the executive committee chooses to push forward 3 candidates or 5 candidates, we can revisit that time. And the 4th, the time would be noon, which is it'll be a special meeting, but it's your regularly scheduled time and date. I sincerely appreciate that back-to-back effort. As candidates are interviewed, if I can tell them within 24 hours afterward that they're get a thumbs up or thumbs down, it reduces some anxiety. Though I suspect the successful candidate will still have a little bit, because they will be waiting for city council to take action a few weeks after that. I will share finally with the board, once a preferred candidate is selected, and I would recommend that a second preferred candidate is also noted by the board, so we will facilitate those discussions. We will also provide questions in advance of the interviews for the board to review, for the board to edit, and for the board to provide feedback on. And we will prepare full digital documents for the board members regarding the candidates in advance of the meeting. Once the preferred candidate and seconded preferred candidate are identified, you have an extra step in your process. It goes to the city council for confirmation. GovHR and I4X is with you through the process of assisting to facilitate that employment process that will immediately follow that, hopefully. If there's no other questions, I appreciate the time you provided us and the answers you provided us this afternoon.
No additional questions, but James and Cheryl, if you could hang out for just 1 minute while we discuss the final issue. So in executive committee, it was brought up that because the process is extending past our normal turnover of the board year, that the executive committee carrying the work forward is not necessarily the executive committee that's been doing this work for the past year. So in discussion in our last meeting, what we came up with as a possible solution was that the incoming executive committee would appoint the outgoing executive committee as the task force to kind of finalize making the decision. Right now, EC is managing the job search through, or the hire through resolution. That's how we would manage the transition of that responsibility as well. So that's a decision and discussion that would be brought to EC and board in July, which is June. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to see if there were any questions or feedback on that before Cheryl and James hopped off. Okay, great. You guys, thank you so much for being a part of our meeting today. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
our pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, see you soon.
All right.
All right, we're now going to move on to the rest of the executive committee report. First, I'd like to request a motion and a second on the resolution to amend the DDA bylaws with the amended conflict of interest language. The resolution and amended language are included in the packet on pages 23 and 24.
Do you need a motion, Jess?
I do, yes.
Okay, motion.
Thank you, Marie. A second, please.
Second, it's Tom.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so I will invite questions or discussion, and then I will have some of my own, but I want to see if there are thoughts, questions, feelings on the table before moving into that. Thank you for pulling that up, Kelly. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to do with this discussion is to acknowledge that conflict of interest discussions have not really been a thing at our board table so far. Every now and then, especially the last couple of months as this work has been percolating up, we've been disclosing. It's a little bit confusing when and where and how and who that happens. And so what I wanted to step through today was not just the bylaws, but a little bit more clarity in how these will be carried out in practice. I want to thank the executive committee, Marie and Darren and Tyler, who, along with Tom Crawford, had conversations with me leading up to today. I talked with them because they are the executive committee, but also happen to represent organizations who have the most business engagement with the DDA and therefore kind of the most embodied conflict, to understand what their concerns were about how these would be executed, and got their permission to use their stories as training for training purposes today. So thank you guys for that. The bylaws, I feel like the language is pretty clear. We're going to have to learn how to manage them as a board in practice, and there will probably be opportunity for continuing to evolve and amend these as we go on, as we find specific situations that need addressing within the language itself. One of the things that the conversations teased out was we're going to need to bump our noses a few times against the existing language before we understand how it needs to be changed. One thing that I want to highlight is that what we have here was taken from the boilerplate that the city uses for its boards and commissions. So we're now a lot more closely in alignment with how the city already thinks about and practices conflict of interest management. When it comes to identifying a conflict in a discussion, there's a couple of different ways that that can happen. So in a board meeting, when there's a resolution on the table, what I'd recommend is wait for the resolution to be moved and seconded. And then if there is something for which you yourself have a conflict, identify yourself, identify your conflict, and then recuse yourself from the discussion and the voting. If there's a discussion on the table, but not a resolution or that kind of decision, and this is true for either board or committee meetings, then you would wait for the topic to be discussed, but still as early on in the topic, identify yourself, identify your resolution, and recuse yourself from discussion. One of the things that the executive committee members brought up is that it's a little bit unclear when in discussion the conflict should be disclosed. It depends on how a particular topic is being initiated at the committee table or the board table. So kind of following that convention, but jumping in as early as possible is useful. There's also an opportunity when you recognize a potential conflict in another board member, not necessarily in yourself. Tyler, can I ask you to share the story that you had shared about the sidewalk vaults? Do you remember? Putting you on the spot a bit.
Sure. So in talking about the sidewalk vaults a couple of years ago, we were going through the potential to have a grant, I think, that would subsidize the costs for the vault filling, not exactly the costs directly to the property owner that abuts it. Essentially, there would be some money that could be set aside towards the project itself that would alleviate some of the costs to the property owners. And in the process of the discussion, John Moet, who was a former board member, was just voicing opinion that that would be a really good thing to help make sure that it happened. But he had just simply, I think, forgotten that he was a property owner of one of the buildings that was on Ashley that would potentially get some of that money. I think he had just not even thought about it because most of the discussion at that time was just citywide. But that was a good example of, like, you know, you could just use a reminder like, hey, that you have an interest here that could be seen in a way that was improper. And there was no bad intention. And as soon as it was mentioned, he's like, oh, right. Sorry. Yes, I'm a property owner. I should recuse. But I think that was a good example sort of just a healthy reminder and some of the problems that come up with a small town and people owning property.
So thank you very much for that. That was something that came up a couple of times, is what happens if we're not sure whether something is a conflict either for another board member or for ourselves. It's fine just to open the conversation at the board table or the committee table and ask. So for example, in talking with Marie, one of the things that she's struggled with more recently is the improvements on Ashley are pretty close. Most of them are pretty close to the art center. For example, the light improvements that are being considered. And Marie's uncertain about whether participating in conversations constitutes a conflict of interest given her leadership position at the art center. That would be a great time to open up the conversation. In general, we can probably accomplish it through consensus, whether it's a committee meeting or a board meeting. We can kind of determine by feel together whether something does constitute a conflict or not, and whether that board member should recuse themselves. In an instance where consensus is unclear or can't be reached, or there's definitely a difference of opinion, the bylaws enable a formal vote taken again at the committee meeting, which is something that Darren was referring to earlier about how we manage committees is a little bit unclear when it comes to voting. The way that the current bylaws say is all board members present will vote and the majority vote carries. So if there's an uncertainty about it, it can be a board conversation. If consensus isn't reached, the vote can be taken. Any thoughts or questions so far? Okay.
Jess, this is Darren. One thing that I wanted to bring up that we talked about in our other meeting is, as we continue to do streetscape projects, and let's say we're doing multiple blocks of any given street, by the nature of that project, you're going to be bordering multiple different private properties. And given the nature of the makeup of our board, it is possible that you're going to have multiple people recusing themselves because of this issue. And I can't imagine a situation, but it is feasible that you could have enough recusals to get to the point where you don't have a quorum, which is where we talk about maybe bumping into it and dealing with it. But that's the kind of thought that, you know, when we have policies like this, at any time, I try to think of unforeseen consequences of trying to do the right thing. And then just something to keep in mind. And, you know, if we get to that, we'll have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. That, I think, is an opportunity. I know many of our committees, the committee chairs do advanced work of committee meetings with staff members on preparing for the agenda and the conversation. That could be a good time to identify potential conflict conversations. And if there's a quorum issue anticipated, if there's a way to manage that, that's a little bit more easily managed at the committee rather than at the board table. But all I'm saying is I think there's an opportunity for the most part to work with that. Like you said, Darren, it's a little bit hard for me to imagine that becoming a problem at the board table, but I think if it did, we'd have enough lead time on the issue to be able to establish, is there a way that we can make the decision in smaller increments that allows for appropriate and ethical voting? Is there a way to switch it up somehow? So I agree with you. And like, as I said at the beginning, I think it's pretty certain that these bylaws will end up being amended over time. We're just going to have to figure out where they don't work.
Micah, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, so I think it'd be helpful also to have a little more direction on what is a direct benefit versus indirect. Because a lot of our work is downtown wide, we do have a number of property owners, people with business interests, et cetera, on the board. So there's some things I think that are a benefit in a indirect way to all of downtown, to all property owners. You know, Tyler's example was a fairly direct benefit to a direct property owner with dollars and financial gain. Things like streetscape projects, street closure funding, you know, these kind of things that add a broader benefit that may indirectly, of course, benefit some board members, either business, property owners, however. I think it'd be really helpful to have some direction on that, because it seems a little restrictive on some of this if we're considering anything we do downtown, you know, capital improvements, et cetera, street projects, to be a direct benefit to the adjacent businesses or property owners. So I get the spirit and I agree with it, but I think that we might be setting ourselves up for a lot of confusion and, to Darren's point, a potential of multitude of conflicts of interests across the board, given some of the projects that we do have and undertake.
That's a good point, and something that all three of the executive committee members brought up as concerns in their initial conversation. Darren had also noted that there's the possibility of expanding the bylaws to include, as you just said, Micah, direct and indirect benefit, and possibly clarifying, you know, what that is, and if there is a difference in practice, like how we carry out the decision making from decisions like that. One thing that I'd like to kind of remind us is that, kind of up to affirm what you're saying, this isn't here in case there are conflicts. All of us have a vested interest in the downtown, often a direct business interest in the downtown. We have a direct stake in this district being successful in different ways. So the question is, how do we manage ourselves with integrity and transparency while we're still stewarding public resources and holding the public trust? And to your question, Micah, I think that first of all, I want us to be having more of these conversations, which for the most part we haven't been having. It's not interesting to me to solve the unclarity here. We're going to go, part of the reason that I asked to change the agenda of the board meeting is we're going to go almost immediately into a conflict of interest discussion, and I just want us to practice it a little bit, or a conflict of interest like being disclosed and acted on. What I'm saying is I'd rather us be a little bit more conservative in terms of interpreting benefit, because we are a public board. If there's something that can be constituted as benefit, even if it's indirect, if it accrues to us directly or to our employer, I think it's important that we have that conversation. Whether or not that person then recuses themselves from a decision can be a contextual decision. But I think we need to be having those conversations a little bit more frequently and a little bit more frankly. And Tom has talked about this as well, you know, other boards and commissions at the city end, some of them have already normalized these conversations. It feels a bit clunky for us because it's new. So I hear what you're saying, Micah, that this could be restrictive. Let's try it on and see what happens.
Can just if I could offer, like, I think what would be helpful for me is is for us, for the board or for the DDA to offer to board members someone to talk to like list out what you have and get advisement. And in fact, someone on the DDA staff or someone should be forthcoming and saying, Rishi, you need to look at this one. Let's talk about it. It's upcoming, versus putting all the onus on us to interpret and then going back. I mean, just if we're going to get this detailed, then I would actually prefer advisement on it versus we said it to you. You needed to, you didn't know that your XYZ was next to Ashley Street and we were doing this. That just seems tricky.
I hear you, and I think that there absolutely can be staff-initiated discussions there. There are often going to be relationships and contracts that staff isn't aware of. So it is really, the onus is on the board to be aware and disclose. To your other point about being able to go over this with someone, staff is actually either contacted or contacting the Michigan Municipal League to have them come in and do specific training with us around conflict of interest. I am interested in your idea, Rishi, about having a resource person to be able to go over stuff like that with. If that's okay, let's take that conversation offline with staff to figure out what best next steps are.
And Jess, this is Maura. If I could just add, you are correct. Kelly has reached out to the Michigan Municipal League, and we have a meeting with them in July to get on the calendar for them to come to the board and do some education. And then just to Micah's point, the direct versus indirect benefit, I think in general, it would be something would be considered a conflict if a property owner was getting more benefit than the general public. So you're right, Michael, like all our streetscape projects, of course they benefit you, but they benefit everybody, you know, you as a business owner, but they also benefit the community at large. So it's more something where, you know, if there were work on your property, which, you know, normally we wouldn't do because it's private work, but it would be more specific to the property and the either employer or business. But in general, if you're not getting more of a benefit than anyone else in the community, it's not a conflict. It wouldn't be considered a conflict.
Thank you, Maura. That's really helpful because it did read confusingly in that way. And I think that the reason that a lot of people, the whole reason that this board is comprised of these individuals is because they have vested interests in the health and vitality of downtown. And there's a lot of those kind of conflicts baked in as a natural course. So that's helpful advice. And I think that clears up a lot. And allows a lot more latitude for advocating for our communities.
And if I can just throw in just to your point about like the onus is on us to like disclose. So, I mean, it's pretty common. I have to do this at U of M and a couple other places. Like there's a list of conflicts of interest, conflicts of interest, and onus is on us to disclose them. And you got a new contract or a new property or whatever, you put it in there. But then someone on staff is able to, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's like this area or this part of downtown or this street or whatever. Like we could try to disclose that in a way that is easier for staff or someone to say something pops up and it's coming down the line. Be like, this might be something to look at. So I think like it wouldn't just be all on someone to be like magically read your mind as to what you're involved in. Like there should be an area where we can update our conflict sheet or whatever, and then also have this kind of like proactive look at it idea.
For sure. And conflicts are on the appointment and reappointment sheets for the board. So those are disclosed there. Rishi, I take your point that this is kind of a collaborative thing between board and staff, and I absolutely agree with that. One of the reasons that I'm hesitant to saying that that information would ever be perfect is I'm thinking about Alex, for example, who is an attorney, with a client portfolio that we're never going to know. Many of us have business interests or business relationships that may not be obviously apparent even on a conflict of interest form until a specific decision comes up. So I agree with you that I think that there's opportunity for collaboration there. It's just never going to be perfect.
So this will not breach attorney-client. All right, well, I'll figure out a different loophole then. Never mind.
See, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. All right, other thoughts, questions, feelings? All right, I'll say one more thing and then we'll take a vote. This last one isn't in the language of the bylaws, but it's something that's come up in practice with respect to how board members engage with staff, specifically on the business side. So this isn't to do with DDA board and committee business. I feel like we have a pretty good chain of command as far as communication and transparent open meetings goes in terms of our communication between staff and board. Where it gets a little bit trickier is when there are business engagements between board members' organizations and board members personally and staff with respect to the business of our respective organizations. So one of the practices that's been suggested is for board members who are employed or lead a larger organization to appoint someone besides yourself to have the business relationship with the DDA. So your controller, your facilities person, your accounting person, your right-hand Batman, like whoever it is, have that person be the one who has the business relationship with the DDA so that there is not, the DDA staff doesn't have to manage a power discrepancy between your role as board member and your role as this person at this organization. For folks at smaller organizations, the suggestion is to confine yourself to conversations with the executive director. So if you're a member of a 1 or 2 person organization, just yourself, to hold your conversations to the executive director and have that person manage conversations and work with staff again. So they're, all of staff isn't having to balance kind of those multiple power hats of you as board member and you as person at your organization. All right, final discussion before voting. Tom, yes.
Hey, Jessica, I just wanted to thank you for your leadership in bringing this forward and trying to establish and normalize a culture where we just talk about this more. I think it's been said a couple of times that the board has interests in the downtown. Board members have interest in the downtown, and I just want to point out that that's not just a local thing. That's actually anticipated under the state law that creates the DDA. And so it really is a plan to be that way. So anyway, I'm looking forward to, I think, I feel very comfortable that we're going to figure this out as we go along. It won't be perfect the first time through, but we'll figure this out. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to steal your expression, bump noses. I hadn't heard that one before. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I was going to follow up something to Rishi, but it was just conversational, nothing decision. So, and it's escaped my mind. But Rishi, you had a good point, and I was going to respond to it. So, whatever it was. Okay, so lots of discussion. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of that. Oh, I remember. The last thing that I wanted to say, just kind of a general comment about conflict of interest. Rishi, to your point about who's disclosing, who's identifying, how are we helping. The whole point of these bylaws and everything else is to help us be successful. The point isn't a gotcha. The point isn't to disenfranchise us from conversations or decisions. The point is to help us be successful as public leaders and servants. And so if we can approach it from that perspective, that we're here to be successful in our roles, hopefully that will help the conversations, including and especially when they get into gray area. So having said all of that, moving into the voting, all those in favor of the resolution to amend the DDA bylaws, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the resolution passes. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, staff. Staff did a boatload of work the last several months. I appreciate Sean and his leadership from the city side, Maura and Sarah, all of the heavy lifting that you did, and Kelly. Very, very, very much appreciate all of you in the executive committee and helping me prepare for today. Next, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second on the resolution clarifying the designation of the DDA's FOIA coordinator. The resolution is on page 25 of the packet. So if I could get a motion in a second. Don't talk too much. Thank you, Tyler.
Second, Marie.
Thank you, Marie. Any discussion? Essentially, we're changing the role of FOIA coordinator from Jada as person to executive director as position. Okay. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the resolution clarifying the designation of the DDA FOIA coordinator, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you, guys. We also previewed today's board agenda, and the next committee meeting is scheduled for June 30th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Now, finding my place in our agenda. I skipped past public comment, Kelly. Or did we do it?
No, you didn't. I thought you were gonna go back to because we have public comments, CAC report out. We have the chunk at the
Okay.
beginning.
Okay, so we're going back to the very beginning of the meeting. Kelly, do we have anybody signed up or indicating public comment?
No one that signed up beforehand. I see Peter Honeyman has his hand up.
Okay, Peter.
Hi. The Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council met last night over Zoom. Most of the meeting was devoted to a lively discussion of today's DDA resolution to fund public art projects on the First and Ashley and Huron projects. The CAC enthusiastically supports public art in general and these proposed projects in particular. We were fortunate to have Arts Commissioner John Kotarski with us to share his knowledge of public art projects and process in Ann Arbor. John was especially helpful in describing the selection process used by the Arts Commission, which emphasizes diverse viewpoints, extensive outreach, and public engagement at every step. It's a great model. We also reviewed and applauded some of the public art projects recently installed in downtown Ann Arbor. We love the utility maintenance hall covers. I guess I forgot to say, this is Peter Honeyman from downtown Ann Arbor. So that is the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. So I guess that constitutes our update on last night's CAC meeting. So thank you for the 1-2 on that, Peter. Next up is DDA board member communications. Please state your name before you speak. Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Maura Thompson for the executive director report.
I do not have a report today.
Very good. At this point, I'll ask for a motion and a second to please approve the May minutes. Thank you, Tyler.
Second, this is Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any discussion or corrections? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, hearing none, the April minutes are approved. Sorry, April or May minutes? May minutes are approved. Next up we're going to the actual DDA subcommittee reports, starting with Capital Improvements Committee. I'll turn it over to co-chair Alex Deek.
Thank you, Jess. Okay, so the first thing we have up is a resolution. So go to page 19 of your packets. And I'd like to move a resolution to approve a grant for public art in the Huron First and Ashley project corridors. Can I have a second, please?
So, okay, here we go, you guys, after that long conversation. Do
Is
I
this where
say,
we have to ask?
yeah, do I do it now? Do I say now that I have a conflict, or do I let the motion go forward, or how does that work?
Let's get the resolution on the floor, so the motion and the second, and then before proceeding into discussion.
Second by Tom Crawford.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so this resolution is as part of the city CIP process. The Public Art Commission recommends projects that they feel should use a portion of their budget on public art. The Public Art Commission recommended that the DDA set aside a portion of the Huron and First and Ashley project budgets for public art. Since Huron and First and Ashley are bond funded, any public art must be installed by the end of the bond term, which is February 6, 2022. At our last CIC meeting, the Ann Arbor Art Center presented a proposal requesting up to $80,000 on the First and Ashley Street project area and up to $50,000 in the Huron Street project area for public art installations. The proposed installations include murals on private buildings and a sculpture. And we can go through the resolution, but just so you have some background, at CIC committee meeting, we had some feedback from the committee and staff. And so we added some language to the resolution regarding the relationship between the art district and the art center. So we can talk about that if anybody has any further questions. We also, in response to a question from a committee member, staff reached out to the city bond attorneys to confirm if bond dollars may be used to install public art on private property. We have not received a final response yet, but as a result, the resolution has been tweaked a bit to say that the making of the grant contingent on the city of Ann Arbor approving the use of the bond funding. The staff also confirmed that there's no current language in the mural contracts with the private property owners, which stipulates how long the installation must be up. So no language requiring that private property owner to keep up the art installation for any period of time. But you know, the note on this is that most of the property owners entering into these agreements contribute funds to the project, and they're invested in the longevity of the installation. And also, the DDA is not required to spend public dollars on public art. So that was a question that came up. So with that, are there any questions or any more points for discussion on this resolution?
So I would like to state a conflict of interest, and I'm Marie Clough, and I'm the president and CEO of the Ann Arbor Art Center. So I will not participate in the discussion and will recuse myself from any vote.
Thank you for being our first guinea pig, Marie.
I'll just add, I think everybody was pretty excited. Just like Mr. Honeyman said, it's going to be a great thing, and all the public art that's already gone up has been wonderful downtown.
This is Jessica. I'm just excited to see this come forward. I'm glad to be part of an organization that supports public art. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the resolution to approve the grant for public art in the Huron, First and Ashley project corridors, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the resolution passes.
Okay, moving on. The rest is just updates and what we talked about at the CIC meeting. So the first is an update on People Friendly Streets Phase 2. State Street is a joint project with the city, and the work for State Street will include upsizing water main and road resurfacing. The city is responsible for bidding out the project, and DDA will have a cost share agreement with the city. A curbless approach is being explored for State Street, which reinforces the pedestrian focus and fluid movement between the curb and the sidewalk, and flexibility for special events and street closures. The Division Street Bikeway received strong support at the March Community Outreach. Construction of the bikeway will begin in late summer to utilize bond funds. In addition to Division Street, CIP recommendations coming to June CIC include one, the Miller and Catherine project in 2022, which includes water main upsizing to support the Ann Arbor Housing Commission development. Also streetscape restoration in a two-way separated bike lane. The 4th Avenue project, which is also to support the Housing Commission in AAA TA as they redevelop the old Y site. And this project will need to be undertaken when development is complete. And there's also a study of two-way restoration on 5th Avenue and Division Street to better understand project feasibility and the benefits to downtown and DDA values. Amber is available to answer any questions. Okay, the last little bit of updates are on First Street and Ashley Street. So First Street construction, traffic signal work continues at the intersections of First and Huron and First and Miller. Stone base of First Street, which is Miller to Kingsley, is being prepared for paving, which should be the middle of next week. Installation of the brick pavers at Kingsley Bend will be completed in the next few weeks, and the final resurfacing, which is Huron to Kingsley, is expected by the end of June. On Ashley Street construction, work is continuing on the construction of the bump outs at Ann and Ashley south of Huron. The base layers of asphalt have been placed. Contractor will be working on installing a bump out near the dairy, Washtenaw Dairy, installing foundations for railroad signals, and finishing the traffic signal work at the Ashley, Liberty, and Ashley here on intersections over the next few weeks. And finally, the final layer of asphalt is expected to be paved on Ashley the week of June 21st. The restoration of two-way traffic is expected mid-July. And Liz is available for any construction update questions you may have. Okay, that's it. The next Capital Improvements Committee meeting is Wednesday, June 16th at 11 a.m.
Thanks, Alex. I live not too far from the intersection of Liberty and Ashley, and it has been such a pleasurable pain in the butt to navigate that area, but exciting. Okay, next up is the Operations Committee report. I'll turn it over to Committee Chair Darren McKinnon.
Darren, you're on mute.
As Cheryl says, you have to put your quarter in the box. All right, I want to move the following resolution and ask for a second. We have a resolution to authorize payment of the full annual performance-based incentive fee for a public parking contract year 2020 to 2021. Management fee, can I get a second?
Second, Alex.
Thank you. The management incentive fee is based on performance and is not based on system revenue. And RPS continues its excellent work in operating and maintaining the parking system, including its COVID-19 response and overseeing installation of the new parking equipment, the TIBA equipment. And the committee is recommending authorization of the full $50,000 management to Republic Parking. Please note that as part of what we're doing right now, we're working on a new form of contracts for our future parking operator contract. And one of the items that's specifically being worked on is improving the metrics for the assessment of any future, how we would determine how we would pay a future bonus to either Republic or a different operator should we change. So we're still operating under the old contract, which doesn't really contain any hard metrics. So is there any discussion on this resolution? Doesn't look like it. I guess we're ready for a vote then.
Yep. All those in favor of the resolution to authorize payment of the annual performance-based incentive fee for Republic Parking Contract year 2021, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Okay, resolution passes. Thank you.
Okay, as Maura mentioned in the other meeting we had, the parking equipment update project has been completed, and the TIBA equipment is fully operational, and all the garages have that system online. So go downtown with your car and try out the new TIBA equipment and let us know what you think. And Rishi, be happy to know that we have enhanced data management as part of the new TIBA system. We have not seen any of this purported data, but we are told that it's much easier to generate customized reports. And we are hoping that in the future, we'll be able to get monthly reports and create a dashboard performance metrics so that we can all enjoy the numbers.
I'll send Joe spreadsheets every week.
So something to look forward to with the new TIBA system. Restoration work is going to be completed in the next couple of weeks here for the FY21 budget. It was reduced from original to, because of our reduced revenue, but as Maura also mentioned, some things did still happen. We have bids, documents on the street for bids for 4th and William, 4th and Washington, and Ann Ashley for those structural repairs. And a resolution for vendor selection, establishing a project budget for 22. Restoration work will be considered at the June Operations Committee. So you guys will see that the next board meeting, which is actually in June. I'm jumping ahead. And then community high school parking lot is going to be closed. Public schools is closing that lot. We have an agreement with the Republic and the DDA to manage that for a public parking lot during market days and other non-school times. So Jada can provide details on that if anybody has questions. Okay, seeing none, We have some information that I believe we can put on the screen here about our revenue projections. Again, Maura stole my thunder with her presentation and just took all my charts and graphs. So you've already seen all this.
Sorry, Darren.
But there it is. Look familiar? We're on target for our projection, not our budget, but that's no surprise. And if you've been downtown, as I was downtown last night for my wife's birthday, it's surprisingly busy these days, which is nice to see. So any questions on the revenue? It's better than last year and not quite as good as budget, but right where we kind of projected. Where Sarah projected. Better than last year is not saying much. Okay, if there's no questions, that's the end of my presentation. Our next operations committee meeting will be Wednesday, June 23rd at 11 a.m. Look forward to seeing you all there.
Thanks, Dan. Next up is the Affordable Housing and Economic Development Committee report, and I'll turn it over to co-chairs Tyler Kinley and Micah Bartoni.
Wonder if Micah took a little break.
There we go.
All right, guys, we're back. So the Affordable Housing and Economic Development Committee, we did a partner meeting. So we do have partner updates. We'll start with the Ann Arbor District Library. The AADL continues to follow the MI Start map and vaccination rate data, has opened the browsing collections to public, planned for early summer. Programs and meeting room reservations are still on hold. I don't know if some of this has changed in the interim. Josie can follow up with any questions. The vestibule service and pickup lockers put in place this past year will remain as standard services post-pandemic. We also had Jennifer Hall from the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. Jennifer Hall provided updates on the 4 downtown city-owned sites being considered for affordable housing development. Challenges and opportunities for each location, including but not limited to funding options, environmental issues, regulatory guidelines, and debt service obligations were shared. The Ann Arbor Housing Commission brought 3 resolutions to City Council informed by the results of the community engagements on the sites. We had Matt Carpenter from the AAA-TA. AAA-TA is on target to return to full service in August. Ridership is anticipated to remain below normal levels for the next 2 years due to the impacts of the pandemic. Stakeholder outreach is underway to inform the AAA-TA's long-range The Ride 2045 plan. We also heard from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is involved in the AAA-TA discussions about expanding the transit corridors in the State Street, Eisenhower, Plymouth, Washtenaw, and Stadium area. The state's first marijuana consumption facility has been approved for development on Ashley behind the Klein lot. We also had our representatives from City Council come and share with us. Council voted on adopting the final fiscal year 22 budget on May 17th. The city is looking to return to an in-person work environment after Labor Day. The city was successful in its request to increase its federal American Rescue Plan funding from 11 million to 24 million. Councilmember Ramlawi thanked the DDA for approving a resolution of up to $195,000 for pre-entitlement of 415 West Washington. Revisions to ease some of the ADU, that's accessory dwelling unit, building restrictions are underway. And the revised Healthy Streets resolution is being considered for fiscal year 22. Council is receiving complaints from business owners about the weekend street closure program that was expanded this year to include Thursday. And from the DDA updates were given on the First and Ashley Street projects as reported by Alex earlier. The next Affordable Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting will be Wednesday, June 9th at 9 a.m. and it will be DDA only.
Thanks, Micah. Next up is the Finance Committee report. I'll turn it over to co-chairs Bob Gunzel and Marie Klopp.
So we have a riveting report in that we didn't have a meeting, so there was nothing to meet on. So our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 24th at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Marie.
That's some good teamwork right there. Okay, that is all of our committee reports. Is there any DDA new business to discuss? Okay, seeing none, I see that we have members of the public in attendance. Kelly, I'll ask for your help in seeing if there are folks who would like to give public comment. In the meantime, if you're attending by computer or phone with the Zoom app, please use the raise your hand function and I'll call on you. At that time, please unmute your microphone, state your first and last name, and share your comments. If you're attending by phone or audio only, please unmute your microphone and request a comment, and Kelly or I will call on you. We ask that you state your first and last name and share your comments. As with in-person meetings, you'll have up to 4 minutes to speak.
I see Peter Honeyman would like to speak.
Peter?
Hi, Peter Honeyman, downtown Ann Arbor. It is true, it is indeed the case that things are much better this year than they were last year. I reviewed my lockdown journal from a year ago today, and it basically has a couple snippets and concludes, the news is simply unbearable. We're much better off now. I also want to report that I have used the new TIBA system, and it's a lot better. I've used it quite a bit, and I like it quite a lot. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Kelly, is there anybody else?
Yes, I see Josie Parker has her hand up.
Oh, Josie.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you, Micah. The library, the whole entire district library will be reopening on July 12th, full service, with a few exceptions. There won't be the possibility of reserving meeting rooms. People can use the space for first come, first serve. We will not be doing inside programming for a while, but we are planning some outdoor activities. Summer game will happen. There will not be codes inside buildings, though, to try to limit the exposure for those who, by age, play summer game a lot but aren't vaccinated. So we're trying to acknowledge that still a risk for some people, but we are ready and excited and planning, and the time will fly by, and we're looking forward to July 12th. Thank you.
I've got some good news. Thanks, Josie. Kelly, is there anybody else?
No, I do not see anyone else.
Okay. Our next board meeting will be on Wednesday, June 30th, 2021 at 12 noon. This time I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thanks, Marie.
Micah, second.
Thanks, Micah. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Well.
Thanks, everybody.